Well, I think the impact of Thatcher and what she meant's already faded, moving like never before. These are massive problems. If you had to vote tomorrow, you'd vote Farage, wouldn't you?
Shall I tell you why I voted Farage? Do you want the...
you did vote Farage. Just let's get it out here, just to be clear.
Does moderation get you anywhere? Serious question. Just shouting a minute, listen.
We're continuing our special coverage of Margaret Thatcher's centenary, and we had so much fun last night that I'm delighted to be joined again tonight by broadcaster and host of Drive on Talk, Jeremy Kyle, the historian Tessa Dunlop, and the former political editor of The Sun during the entirety of Thatcher's reign, Trevor Kavanagh. Guys, welcome back. We got a little bit heated about Thatcher's legacy with feminist icon last night. The question that I want to ask now is, will we ever see her like ever again? Let's go to our historian friend, Tessa Dunlop.
Well, I think the impact of Thatcher and what she meant's already faded because we've had two subsequent female prime ministers. And I think it's very hard for today's generation of younger women to realise what she did, just how epoch-defining it was. She actually gave, on the eve of the first election in 1979, her party political broadcast was given up to reassuring the people about voting for a woman. She said, you know, for me, it's not about who you are or where you're from, it's about your convictions, she said. She literally kind of took it to the people because that's how big a deal it was, the fact she was a woman.
It was a pioneer, Jeremy. We're still having this argument in the United States that, you know, Kamala Harris blamed the fact that she was a woman for losing a couple of percentage points on the vote. Hillary Clinton's made the same point. Harris said that she couldn't have a gay running mate because America was basically too homophobic to accept. She was a pioneer, right?
A complete pioneer, and I'm sort of very much, strangely, weirdly with you on this. I don't think you will see the like of her again. I think there's always circumstance that a certain person can enter the political arena. There are reasons that it happens. You think about Thatcher, a woman in a man's world. Let's be perfectly honest. 10 years, 11 years. If you disagree with the Farage, at the end of that time, there were 400 men in a room who got rid of her. The clothes shop taking on the unions, the Falklands. You could argue she had good enemies, but what you could say about this woman was she laid it out there, and I think history will show that we will... I don't think there will be a leader of that... Is braveness the right word? That ill.
Brave.
She was brave. That is the word for me, brave, and didn't care. Trump-esque will say,
sometimes
didn't care what was thrown.
But Trevor, I'm just interested. The idea of a free market economy, it'd been kicking around since the early 70s. What she did was she grabbed it, hauled it into existence, but somebody was going to have to do that, weren't they? It just happened to be Thatcher.
This is true, and all the circumstances at the time pointed in that direction. Someone had to do it. And the big difference between now and then, and whether or not there could be another Margaret Thatcher, is that the world has changed totally. Yeah. And it's basically irreconcilable. You can't have one person coming in and saying, this is what I'm going to do anymore. I mean, we're going to have, if there's another woman Prime Minister, for instance, it probably will be Shabana Mahmood. And I think
the current Labour Home Secretary.
That will be the first Muslim Prime Minister, as well as the first Labour woman Prime Minister. And that is for a reason, because she would be acceptable to the Labour Party. I'm assuming that Starmer isn't going to last till the next election. I would put money on Shabana Mahmood becoming the next Prime Minister. But all the sort of problems that any Prime Minister has to encounter these days is not just economic, which is almost intractable, without enormous, almost revolutionary changes to our economy and our way of doing business, but also to the changes of our population. We now have to consider and take into account the thoughts and feelings of a very significant chunk of our population.
Isn't it also, Trevor, as well, and I agree with you, we always talk about the blob, don't we, in the civil service. Somebody told me the last election that only 200 people lost their jobs the day that the Tory party... 100 special advisors and 100 government ministers. I know you're going to disagree with this. Do you think Thatcher... Here's a question for all of you.
She hated the civil service.
Precisely, but the blob that quite blatantly does control so much of central government, what would she have done today to the blob? Would she have fired them? Would she have stood up to them? That's what I'm talking about.
It's a misnomer, and I'm hoping you're coming with me on this, Trevor, even though you're one of them. It's a misnomer that we can blame this small blob when actually there are
10,000 people. It's not a small number of people.
Seismic issues that society faces. Yeah. For example, in the 1980s, there were 4 workers for every old person. Trevor being an old person, for example.
Oh, is that what you meant when you said come with me on
Nowadays, there are 2 workers for every old person. On top of that, you've got civil strife globally that we've never seen, and I know all of you will deny it, but climate change is squeezing the pips in the central belt of the world, so people are moving like never before. These are massive, massive problems.
I am not coming with you.
You're not.
Breaking.
What about paying for you,
news.
paying for huge numbers of old people?
Well, this is one of the major problems.
It is a
I
problem.
agree with
So
that.
that's
but,
a problem.
I mean, I thought you were saying there's no such thing as a blob, which there is, and the blob is resistant to almost every single change that's necessary.
Do you know, can I tell you something? We talked about this on my show. Just let me get this out. The reason I absolutely realised there was a blob, a couple of years ago, and I wasn't a fan of Rwanda, a bunch of civil servants inside the Home Office, paid by the British taxpayer, decided they didn't like the policy of a democratically elected government, so went to the High Court using lawyers paid for by the taxpayer. The fact that to go against a your job is not to define policy. Your job is, as a civil servant, to carry out what that democratically elected government decide to do. I think they're far too powerful.
When Donald Trump came into power, he brought with him 4,000 political appointees across all the departments. He seems to be moving fast and breaking things and getting things done, using executive power.
Actually, have you looked at his polling? Have you looked at the National Guard on the street in several democratic cities? Would you really want to be on the other side of the line in America? I've got to push back here, guys. It's really easy to blame it all on the law.
DC is remarkable. The National Guard on the streets is remarkable.
But are you aware of the fact that the public sector in Washington is on strike? 40,000 people, I think, in key positions are on strike. And whenever that happens in America, productivity goes up.
Yeah.
Because the public sector is a total drag on the economy. And that's what's happening here in Britain.
Let's move on to another point that's been discussed. We were talking about whether we'll ever see her like ever again. The interesting point Sir Mark Thatcher made yesterday was that actually, while he was quite lukewarm on Kemi Badenoch, he did say, to her credit, this global situation, the national situation, the economic situation, and in fact the social situation that his mother came into office with in 1979 bore a remarkable similarity to the issues Kemi Badenoch is facing, or whoever is going to be the next Prime Minister is facing now. And that's where I think
Kemi Badenoch is probably a good woman and a reasonable politician, and I think we can sit here and talk about what's happening globally, but in pure basic terms, right? The Tory party are going to have to suffer their penance for what they did. And I believed in the last couple of months when they were in power, they could have promised us anything. The British public had stopped listening to the Tory party. And that is not, in my mind, going to be recoverable in a year or two. It will take 10 years. Absolutely.
I think there has to be a start at some point. She's made the start on stamp duty, which is a tax cut.
Well, she now needs 14 years in power, though, right?
What she now needs to do is spell out exactly where they're going to save money. The triple lock, which is one of the sainted policies of the Conservative Party, has to go. And so do free bus passes for people of old age, like me, which costs £100 million a year.
Where will you find a
go on the bus?
Where will you find a party on the right undercutting their loyalist voters? They're not going to do it.
No one's being honest.
That's the whole point of politics. And this is where Margaret Thatcher, as a conviction politician, put in practice things which were temporarily unpopular.
But it's anathema to me why half the right-wing press, including your lot, pushed and pushed and pushed for the heating allowance to be reinstated for people like Trevor and my mother. It's absolutely ridiculous. Actually, where you need to invest is in young people of a fertile age who are not having children because there isn't the money or financial security.
You don't believe we should be heating the homes of old people who've spent years paying into a system.
But the most vulnerable, you could have marginally moved up the bar to say those were on £20,000 or less.
But people like you will say that everybody who's old has got savings. There's
I didn't say everybody. People like me.
If you get out of the bubble of the M25, there are millions of people in this country who've worked all their life who are struggling.
Okay.
And that £300 is really important.
The winter fuel allowance was a bribe by Gordon Brown for one purpose only, which was to wrong-foot the Tories because he knew they would never...
And I'm looking forward to Miss
It's good King Wenceslas, isn't it?
Yep.
There's the poor man gathering winter fuel, and that's his image of the Saint Gordon. It doesn't work. Subsidies never do work.
But they're very addictive. And once you've given them out, you can't take them back.
Extremely. Maybe they need a government shutdown, Trump style, to pull some of these programmes.
Get the National Guard on the streets of London.
We need to be honest, and what's interesting is people like you said the next solution is Farage, and yet Farage is all for giving out other tidbits.
Sorry, have I said that at all?
Yeah, in the dressing room. Yeah, definitely.
The sanctity.
Hold on a second. Sorry, Harry, look at
Has
me.
he got his makeup
Excuse me. In the dressing room, do you want to go there? Do you want to admit you know?
No, don't want to go there.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go. This is the family. You've dropped the F-bomb now, so let's do it. Mark Thatcher saying that Nigel Farage, his economics, Trevor, that isn't Thatcherism, is it?
No, and I think that as time passes, one of the things that Mark Thatcher did say was 2 or 3 years to go before the next election. I think the gloss is going to come off Nigel Farage, to some extent at least, when he is scrutinised for what he does, not just as the leader of a potential government, but how he's performing as the reform is performing in local authorities, where it's the acid test of him in government pre the election.
But isn't that the problem, though? Is that local government is utterly screwed completely because of social care. They're not collecting bins. They're paying for old people's care. And actually, it was a tactical and political mistake to suggest that you could make cuts.
And by the way,
I
probably wouldn't have approved of what she's done, but she wouldn't have continued. Thatcher would have probably taken the issue of social care by the horns and dealt with it. I might not have liked the fallout from that because she was always about paring everything to the bone. But the fact is, we never address it because democratically we're too afraid to. You're right, UKIP, I'm still calling them UKIP, the Reform Party, it's the same in different clothes. In Kent, there they go, they're going to slash and burn, everyone's council tax is going to come down, and they've raised it because they've discovered
every local council's raising council tax because they have the
But
power
they said they wouldn't. The point is they got elected saying they wouldn't.
I think 3 years and 9 months is a long time. I think from where I sit, it's fascinating to watch the mainstream media and institutions in this country panic their bits off about what might or might not happen. But I just want to say one thing before we finish. Somebody said to me the other day, and you would actually accept this, when the silent majority in this country suddenly realise that their voice can be heard, whatever colour the government is, they are in trouble. What Farage is doing right now is he seems to have his finger on the pulse of what people are interested in.
There
is no other politician right now. But grievances are what make people interested.
Trevor Kavanagh.
Since we're talking about ancient history, on which I'm an expert,
Never.
One of Margaret Thatcher's heroes was a guy named Sir Roger Douglas, who was the Chancellor or the Treasury Minister in the New Zealand government of the 80s. And the country was on the verge of going bust because it was basically Scandinavia without no money.
Sounds a little bit familiar.
A little bit familiar.
So brief visit back to London.
He abolished all the tariffs, but also abolished all the subsidies. And it caused absolute mayhem. But New Zealand, from that point on, became the most stable and prosperous economy for its size in the world, alongside Australia, but on its own because of those policies. They lost the next election.
Well, that's the price. Connor Burns, who was on the show earlier, was saying exactly that. We're in this. The problem is that to level with the public on exactly what needs to be done. You're going to get...
There's your conviction politician, that's what you need.
If Thatcher's issue was something like 29 million strike days a year when she came to power, that she pared down to 2 million, the problem today is huge numbers of economically inactive. How do you deal with things like PIP? I mean, the fuel allowance is just the thin end of the wedge. These are really difficult questions, and they're ideologically harder for Labour to deal with.
How do you do the right thing and get re-elected? That's the command.
Can you?
Do you not think that looking at Trump, thinking of Thatcher, do you not think, and it might not be Farage, don't misquote me, but do you not think that the British people very soon are going to be willing, prepared, able, / whatever you want to say, for somebody to say, listen, it ain't going to be sorted unless there's some bad medicine. There'll be highs and lows, but it's going to be a journey. Come with me. I'll take you through the whole thing. And it is not going to be nice, but it's the only goddamn way we're getting out this mess. That is why Donald Trump has managed to succeed. That is why Margaret Thatcher has been able to succeed. I don't know if it's Nigel Farage,
but
what you have in this country is, for years, it strikes me, politicians who listen to focus groups and say things not out of conviction, but because they think it's going to get them elected. That doesn't work anymore. That doesn't work. We're in too much of a mess.
Facts. You want to come back on that one?
I just think the issue with Farage is, on the one hand...
Do you agree with me or not?
Well, I don't like the idea of what your bad medicine might be. I think it might be extremely uncomfortable and unkind and possibly even xenophobic. But
Where
because
does
it's really
that
easy.
come from?
Because you tack much harder to the right than me. We've had these discussions before.
But
well, who will you vote for? If you had to vote tomorrow, you'd vote Farage, wouldn't you?
Shall I tell you why I voted Farage? Do you want the?
You did vote Farage. Let's get it out here, just to be clear.
Well, does it matter? I'll tell you exactly why. Because I watched a party political broadcast and I saw somebody talking about low taxation, a strong military, police on the streets that weren't interested in doing the Macarena but wanted to arrest people. They wanted to do tax. And do you know what happened? I saw a Tory MP saying, that's what Farage is talking about, that's far right. No, let me tell you, Tessa, genuinely, I was brought up voting for the Tory party on policies that were exactly that, and I think the Tory party, you couldn't get a cigarette paper between them.
Tessa, the window's moved, isn't it?
What Farage does is he picks on groups, individuals, and places blame on them. I don't hear solutions.
What he does is he talks
about one at a time.
Blame. That's what I mean. I know, but I felt it personally when he said he wouldn't live next door to a Romanian because I'm married to one. But it's ballooned from there. Everyone that can be other, everything that's an incomer. You know, apparently all asylum seekers are rapists and murderers these days. You know, where I live in South London, it's sort of Armageddon.
But people's concerns about that are totally valid, given that asylum seekers are raping people in this country.
It's not a few.
But
a few men who look like you.
But a few.
That is, with respect, sorry. That is an absolute. Do you know what I don't understand? And I wasn't going to say this. I live now down in the Bournemouth area, OK? A 17-year-old girl a year ago is walking on the beach with her friends and gets sexually assaulted by a migrant. A year later in court, the judge said, and this was 3 or 4 weeks ago, Harry knows this story, said, and I quote, he's had a bad upbringing, it's an aberration, he can stay in the United Kingdom. And you are going to insult her parents for saying they are not safe on that
Just go on, let's move on, but have a get back.
Clickbait. Because when there's a white man who's got the same profile as individual at this table, it simply wouldn't be headlines.
All right, time out.
He peddles on our fear, and that's not a blueprint for government.
I don't think he peddles on fear.
Trevor, what's your thoughts on fear?
Well, Trevor and I were about to go get a beer because we thought it'd leave you two to...
I think that peddling fear is a two-way traffic. And peddling fear started with Tony Blair and Andrew Neither, who decided that they were going to rub the Tories, in fact, the population's nose in immigration. And I raised questions, I can remember this vividly, when people like David Miliband was still his PPS in Downing Street. We went to a conference with him, The Sun and its editor and myself. And I asked the question about the increasing number of migrants at that particular time. And I was denounced by one of the ministers, one of the cabinet ministers, as we were leaving the meeting, as a fascist. A fascist, a racist, that's how anyone who has dared to question the sheer volume of people coming into this country, legally or illegally, that's smearing.
I totally agree with you,
that is bad-mouthing. And that is the trend. Everybody then started screaming at each other and calling each other names. And so a rational debate was not possible.
Can I just say, I agree with you that we were one of the exceptional countries within the EU that did not apply the handbrakes that were available to stop tidal waves of people coming in.
Quite the opposite, right?
Which served those people arriving badly, and it served the indigenous British population badly.
Hear, hear.
Actually, as someone who was... my partner at the time was a Romanian. When Romanians weren't even allowed in the country, it was the era of the Poles. And I said, go to the job centre. He was a student. And I said, you also need to get a job. And he said, I couldn't get a look in. And I said, why not? And he said, because there's so many Poles. I thought, oh my God, I predicted Brexit long before it happened. What you need in politics is moderation. But what I don't like is...
Does moderation get you anywhere? Serious question. Just shouting a minute, listen. Does moderation, have we got anywhere with moderated politics?
But the point is we didn't have moderation when it came to immigration. That's why we ended up with Brexit.
The pull of the United Kingdom is far too great.
And actually, nobody will own it, but the combination of Brexit and COVID and the Ukraine war and God knows what has resulted in dire economics, and then you get problems.
And
a million extra people coming in.
Yes, because they're the easy target, the soft target to blame.
Do you remember, Tessa, why Romania, Albania and Bulgaria were not allowed to be in the accession countries at the beginning?
I think it was the economic level in the country at the time, and several other reasons. They didn't meet the corruption and markers.
It was corruption and crime, organised crime, which we have imported this. We are now the organised crime capital of Europe. Simply because we've opened the doors to some of the worst criminals.
And then you can literally get the final word.
I've never felt safer in Bucharest.
That's
because they're all over here. Anyway.
You said it, not me.
High five, mate.
I love Romania.
Hey, high five.
Guys, we're going to call it. I've got a plane to catch. Jeremy Kyle, Tessa Dunlop, Trevor Kavanagh, you've been brilliant. When I'm next in London, you're definitely all coming back on. Thank you for coming. Thank you for attempting to save the West. That was Harry Cole Saves the West. Don't forget to subscribe.